I never thought a simple dinner could detonate like that, casual, warm, familiar, and then suddenly turn into a slow-motion car crash you can't look away from. It was a Sunday, same as always. My parents like routine. Mom had made her famous pot roast, and Dad was already pouring his second glass of bourbon before I'd taken my coat off. The smell of roasted carrots and beef broth filled the house, something that usually calmed me, but that day, it just made me nauseous. My wife, Sophie, gave me that glance, the one that said, "Just get through it, and we can leave after pie." We'd done this 100 times. Sit down, smile, tolerate Jamie. But today wasn't like the others. Jamie arrived late, as usual. Hair perfectly styled like she'd just stepped out of a salon, designer jacket even though it was nearly 90 degrees outside. She sauntered in with that same cocky grin like we were all just extras in the movie of her life. She greeted Mom with a loud kiss, clapped Dad on the shoulder like they were bar buddies instead of father and daughter, and gave Sophie a judgmental once-over that made my stomach twist. I didn't say anything. I never do right away. I let Jamie burn herself out first. Dinner started off fine. Surface-level conversation, the way families do when they're too scared to be honest. Mom asked about Sophie's work, Dad complained about the cost of gas, and Jamie talked about Jamie. Some half-baked story about a business venture out in Austin or Denver, I can't remember. Something about real estate and NFTs, some bullshit buzzwords that meant nothing but sounded impressive to people who stopped learning new things in 2007. Sophie raised her eyebrows at me across the table, silently begging me not to laugh. Then it happened. Jamie leaned back in her chair, wiped her mouth with a napkin, and dropped it like it was nothing. "Hey, Mark," she said, casual like she was asking to borrow the remote. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. It's kind of serious." Right away, I knew where it was going. I'd heard that tone before, that mix of false humility and unearned expectation. "I need $10,000, she said. Just like that. $10,000. Like it was pocket change. She didn't look at anyone when she said it, just me. Like it was already decided. Sophie froze mid-bite. Mom looked down into her mashed potatoes like they were a magic 8-ball that might offer her an escape. Dad's jaw twitched just once, but he stayed quiet. That was his thing. Act like silence makes you wise. It doesn't. I put my fork down, not because I was surprised, but because I wanted her to see I was done eating her bullshit. "No," I said. One word. No hesitation. Jamie blinked. Like, it hadn't even crossed her mind that I'd say no. "What?" She laughed. Like, maybe I was joking. "Dude, it's just $10,000. I'll pay you back." "It's not just anything," I said. "And I'm not giving it to you." The silence was loud. It stretched across the table like barbed wire. Sophie reached over and put a hand on my leg under the table, like she knew what was about to come. Jamie sat forward now. The smile was gone. Her voice rose. "You owe me, man. You fucking owe me." She slammed her hand on the table hard enough that Mom flinched. "You think I forgot what I did for you in college? I covered for you. I saved your ass. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me." And that's when the air changed. That's when everything in that room bent under the weight of what she just said. Sophie turned to look at me, her hand now gripping my thigh tighter. My parents froze like someone had hit pause. You could almost hear the gears turning in their heads. Jamie kept going. "You remember that night? That party? I covered for you. I saved your ass. You'd be in prison if it weren't for me." And that's when I looked her right in the eye, and I said it calm as a church bell in winter. "Fine. Let's talk about what you really covered. You ever watch someone's soul try to climb back inside their body?" That was Jamie in that moment. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked at Mom, at Dad, at Sophie, but it was too late. The words were out. Everyone had heard her. Everyone saw the mask crack. Mom went pale. Dad clenched his fist so tight his knuckles turned white. Sophie's hand let go of mine slowly. And me? I didn't move an inch. Because the truth is, I've been waiting for that moment for 20 damn years. Every birthday, every holiday, every single time Jamie called herself the hero of the family, I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I carried that night like a ghost in my pocket, knowing someday it would come out to breathe. So, yeah. Jamie wanted to open that door? Fine. She kicked it down herself. Now we're all walking through it, and I'm done pretending I don't remember what really happened that night. "Everyone just heard what you said, Jamie," I said, my voice steady, like I'd rehearsed it 1,000 times. "So now I'm done protecting you." Back then, I was maybe 19, maybe 21. Hell, time blurs. I remember it was senior year. Yeah. I was 22. The math probably doesn't check out, but I've never trusted my own memory when it comes to that night. That night didn't feel like a memory. It felt like a bad photograph, overexposed in all the wrong places, leaving out everything I really needed to see. All I knew for sure was I woke up the next morning with a splitting headache, blood on my knuckles, and a campus security officer knocking on my dorm room door like he was delivering death. The party was supposed to be a blow-off, a classic end-of-semester mess of cheap beer, louder music, and even louder regrets. I went to Delta Tau because someone said they had jungle juice so strong it made you forget your own name. And maybe that's exactly what I wanted that night, to forget. My grades were fine. My life was boring. My girlfriend had just dumped me by text message, and I was too much of a coward to admit I actually missed her. So I went, drank, danced, shouted, blacked out. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last, but it was the only time I woke up with people staring at me like I'd done something unforgivable. Jamie wasn't even supposed to be there. She was still in high school back then, a rebellious girl with a fake ID and a reckless streak wider than the Mississippi. She idolized college life like it was a goddamn movie, and she used to sneak up to visit me, pretending she had somewhere else to be. I let her crash on the floor sometimes, didn't think much of it until that night. Because apparently, she crashed the party too. She showed up while I was halfway through my third red Solo cup of whatever the hell was in that barrel and vanished into the crowd like she owned the place. The next morning, everything felt wrong. I couldn't remember what I'd done, but people were looking at me like I'd lit the building on fire. I kept hearing whispers, "Mark. That guy. Are they serious? Nobody would tell me anything straight. Just vague accusations, glances, and then finally, the campus police who said there'd been a complaint. A girl. Her name wasn't in the file they gave me, but they said there'd been an incident on the upstairs landing sometime after midnight. My name had come up. Witnesses placed me there. My blood alcohol level was sky high, and I didn't remember a damn thing. That was when Jamie stepped in. She pulled me aside outside the admin office, eyes wide and voice low, and said, "Don't say a word. Don't confess. I'll handle it." I remember that part clearly. "I'll handle it," she said, like it was some heroic gesture. Like she was stepping in to save me from my own mess. She told me she'd talk to someone, maybe the girl, maybe someone else. It was all vague. And by the next day, the whole thing vanished. The complaint got pulled. No charges filed. The school strongly encouraged me to take a semester off. My parents were furious but relieved. Nobody asked too many questions. And Jamie? She wore that shit like a badge. Anytime I questioned her about it later, she'd just laugh and say, "You owe me, bro. Big time." I figured maybe she'd smoothed it over somehow. Maybe she'd convinced the girl it wasn't serious. Maybe I really had done something and just didn't want to know. That was the sick part. I didn't want to know. I let the shame dig in, I let it settle, and I built my life around avoiding it. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself she saved me. I told myself a lot of things. But after what she said at dinner, after watching her weaponize that secret like a loaded gun pointed at my head, I started to think about it differently. I started to wonder whose mess it really was. I started digging. I went back through some old folders my dad had kept in the attic. He saved everything, letters, notes, even some of my old college stuff. In a yellow envelope was a letter from the school dated April 2003. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to my father. In it, the dean referenced a misunderstanding involving both children. Both children. I read that part again. That didn't make sense. I was the one enrolled. Jamie wasn't even on the radar, officially. So why the hell would they mention both of us? I started emailing. Calling. I reached out to an old classmate who'd been at the party. He didn't remember much either, but he remembered seeing Jamie arguing with someone at the bottom of the stairs. "I think she was trying to get some girl's attention," he said. But she was freaked out. Looked like she was trying to get away. My hands were shaking when I typed the name into my laptop. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. A clue. A post. Anything. And then, there it was, the blog. A dusty little blog with 3 posts and a picture that stopped my breath cold. It was her. I didn't know her name back then. I do now. Emily Cartwright. And she remembers everything. It took me 3 days to get a reply from the email I sent her. Emily Cartwright, the girl from that night, the one whose face I hadn't seen clearly in 2 decades, but had haunted the corners of my memory like a ghost I refused to name. When her message came through, I opened it like it might explode in my hands. I half expected anger, confusion, or nothing at all. But instead, she wrote just one line. "If you really want to talk, I'm ready." We met in a coffee shop on the edge of town, the kind with chipped paint on the walls and bad acoustic covers playing just loud enough to make sure nothing ever felt private. She walked in wearing a long gray coat and a scarf, even though the weather didn't ask for it. She spotted me right away, and I knew she'd recognized me too, despite the years. There was a tightness to her smile, a sort of restraint that said, "I'm here, but don't mistake this for forgiveness." I thanked her for coming, though the words felt hollow even as I said them. We sat across from each other, 2 strangers tethered by one awful night. I didn't know how to start. She helped me out. "You really don't remember anything, do you?" she asked, stirring a cup of tea that had no sugar, no milk, just heat. I shook my head slowly, ashamed all over again. "Only fragments," I said. "Noise. A staircase. My sister saying she'd fix it." She nodded, and for a moment, she looked away. When she spoke again, it was quieter. "I wasn't even supposed to be there," she said. "My roommate dragged me out. Said we needed one night of fun before finals." She laughed a little, but it was bitter, hollow. "You were already out of it when I got there. Drunk beyond reasoning. Stumbling. I remember thinking someone should have cut you off hours earlier." I stayed silent. I had no defense, not even after all these years. "I went upstairs to use the bathroom," she said, her voice steady now, like she'd practiced these words in the mirror before coming. "She followed me. Not you, her. Jamie. She cornered me on the landing. She smelled like weed and whiskey. Tried to act charming, like she knew me. I didn't even know her name. I said no. She didn't like that. Tried to push herself on me, hands on my waist, mouth too close. My fists curled under the table, nails digging into my palms. I shoved her off," she went on, unflinching now. "She stumbled, hit the wall, cursed at me, called me a bitch. I ran downstairs, told a friend. She told campus security. And then the next day, everything got weird. They said it was you. They said multiple people saw you up there, that you were drunk and belligerent. That you'd gotten aggressive." She stared at me now, eyes dark, unwavering. "I didn't see your face clearly that night, but I remember the voice. And it wasn't yours." I tried to tell them. "But someone, your dad, I think, called me. He said you were being sent home, that you were getting help. He said the one who hurt me was gone, and he promised it wouldn't happen again. He offered to pay for therapy, for silence, and I was tired. I was scared. So I let it go." I felt something heavy and cold settle in my chest. A weight I hadn't known was mine. "He told you I was gone," I repeated. She nodded. "He told me you were leaving, and that the other one, the real one, was dealt with. So I didn't press charges." I wanted to scream, to cry, to punch a wall, to go back 20 years and drag Jamie down those stairs myself. But instead, I just sat there and whispered, "He lied to you." She didn't respond right away. She just looked at me like someone who had finally seen the full picture and didn't like any part of it. After we parted ways, I drove in silence. No music. No podcasts. Just the sound of tires on pavement and 1,000 thoughts tearing through my skull. Jamie had used me like a body shield, and our father had helped her do it. I stopped at a gas station on the way home, not to fill up, but because I needed air. I stood in the parking lot, hands on my knees, wondering how many times I thanked Jamie over the years for saving me. When I got home, I pulled out an old lockbox from the attic. Inside were tax papers, birth certificates, and a bunch of envelopes marked with dates. One stood out, April 2003. Inside, a check copy written from my dad to Jamie for $8,000, memo line marked spring tuition. Only Jamie wasn't enrolled in anything. She'd never even applied to college that year. That money wasn't tuition. It was silence. I stared at it until the sun went down, until Sophie found me there on the floor and asked what was going on. I didn't answer her. Not yet. I just stared at that check like it was a crime scene photo. You lied to save yourself, Jamie. I took your guilt for 20 years. Now it's your turn. The turkey was dry, the wine was too sweet, and the whole house felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for the storm nobody could see coming. Thanksgiving at my parents' place was always a little stiff, a little forced, a lot of pretending. This year, though, the air had a weight to it, like the walls knew what was about to go down before the people in them did. I hadn't spoken to Jamie since the dinner explosion 3 weeks earlier, and the silence between us had become its own kind of loud. But she still showed up, of course she did, walking in with that same swagger, grinning like a woman with no shame left to lose. She handed my mom a bottle of wine like that erased everything, gave my dad a slap on the back like they were still on the same team, and then sat across from me with a smirk that said she thought she still held the upper hand. She didn't. I'd spent the last 3 weeks digging through memories I'd spent years trying to forget, talking to people I hadn't spoken to since college, and looking into bank records, disciplinary reports, anything that could prove what I already knew in my bones. But I didn't come here to show paperwork. I came here to break her open in front of everyone in the only language she understood, control. I knew Jamie. I knew how to pull her strings without ever raising my voice. And tonight, I was going to play her like a piano. Dinner was tense from the start. My mom tried to act normal, passing dishes like she wasn't dying inside. My dad barely spoke, just carved the turkey like it was a problem he could solve with a sharp enough knife. Sophie sat beside me, quiet but alert, her fork moving food around more than actually eating it. Jamie filled the silence with small talk and jokes that fell flat, pretending nothing had happened, pretending she hadn't detonated the family's fragile peace with one sentence and a smirk. She thought if she just acted like everything was fine, it would be. That was always her trick. Rewrite the story loud enough, and people forget what really happened. I waited until dessert. That's when everyone's guard drops. That's when they start to think maybe they made it through another holiday without blood on the tablecloth. My mom was bringing out the pumpkin pie when I cleared my throat and said, "Jamie, remember that night in college you covered for me?" The room froze. Forks hovered. My mom's hand trembled just enough for the pie to shift on the plate. Jamie looked up from her coffee with those wide, innocent eyes she'd perfected since childhood. "Man, are we really bringing that up again?" she said with a laugh that didn't quite land. "Water under the bridge, right?" "Yeah," I said, calmly, like I was just reminiscing. But I was thinking about it, trying to remember the details. Funny how it all went down. She narrowed her eyes a little, sensing the trap, but not quite seeing it yet. "You were blackout drunk," she said, leaning back like she was schooling me on my own life. "You don't remember anything. That's why I stepped in." "That's the thing," I said, leaning forward now, voice still even. "I didn't remember anything until recently." Her jaw tightened, barely. Just enough for me to notice. I kept going, slow and steady. "I talked to Emily, Jamie." Her coffee cup froze midair. Clinked back onto the saucer. "I found her blog. Reached out. She responded. Turns out she remembers everything. The stairs. The jacket. The voice that wasn't mine." My dad looked up then. Really looked up. My mom was staring at her lap like maybe if she didn't move, she could disappear. Jamie's voice dropped. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, but I do," I said. "I know you showed up at that party uninvited. I know you followed her upstairs. I know Dad paid you off after. Called it tuition. Want to see the check?" Jamie's face went red. She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again, the words fumbling like loose change in a pocket. "You were drunk," she snapped. "No one would have believed you over me." And there it was. The crack. The slip. The confession. My mom gasped, barely audible. My dad stood up, face pale with something I'd never seen before, not anger, but something close to disgust. Sophie just stared at Jamie like she was a stranger who'd walked into our house and pissed on the rug. "You bitch," Dad whispered, voice shaking. "We protected the wrong child." Jamie tried to backpedal, of course. "You knew what could have happened to him," she said, eyes wide. "I didn't hurt her. Nothing happened." "But you tried," I said. "And you let me carry it for you." My mom started crying, her hands shaking so bad the pie fell to the floor. No one moved to clean it up. Jamie looked around like a woman looking for an escape route that didn't exist. And me? I sat there, calm as a priest at a funeral, watching the structure of lies she'd built come crumbling down around her. She stood, knocking her chair back. "You think you're better than me?" she shouted, but her voice cracked halfway through. "No," I said, standing too, leveling my gaze at her. "I just finally stopped pretending I'm worse." There was a silence after that, thick, choking. Like the moment before a storm hits, when the pressure changes and everything feels off kilter. Jamie stormed out without another word. My father followed, not to stop her, but to make sure she left. My mother just wept. Sophie didn't say anything until we were driving home. And even then, she just asked one question. "Do you feel better now?" I didn't answer right away. I watched the empty road, the headlights cutting through the dark like a knife through guilt. "I don't know," I finally said. "I think I just feel finished." But I wasn't. Not really. Because revenge feels good for about 5 minutes. Then it just feels like ash in your mouth. You ruined your own life, Jamie. I just gave you the match. The days after Thanksgiving felt like winter came early, not in the weather, but in the way everything suddenly froze between people who once shared warmth. No texts from Jamie, no calls, not even one of those cheap apology attempts she used to toss around like confetti when her back was against the wall. It was like she vanished, just like that, as if by saying the truth out loud I'd exorcised her from the family completely. And maybe I had, but the absence didn't feel like victory. It felt like vacuum, like silence with edges sharp enough to cut skin. My dad didn't speak to me for 5 days after that dinner. Then a letter came, real old school, postmarked from 2 towns over where he'd holed up in somebody's cabin. He didn't sign it with love or dad, just scribbled his name at the bottom like it was a resignation form. The letter was short, barely a page, and every sentence read like it had been chewed on before being written down. He said he knew, said he'd known since that morning in 2003 when Jamie came home looking more rattled than he'd ever seen her, claiming I'd gotten mixed up in something bad and begging dad to handle it quietly. Said he talked to a friend in the school board, someone who owed him a favor. Said he pulled the right strings, shut the right mouths, and told himself it was just to keep the family intact. Then he admitted something else, that a part of him always knew it wasn't me, that the timelines didn't make sense, that my hangover wasn't the kind you get from guilt, but from confusion. He said he convinced himself it didn't matter. That I'd recover, move on, do something decent with my life, which I did. And Jamie? He said Jamie was already broken and that maybe he didn't want to break her more. I chose the child I thought could carry it, he wrote. I didn't ask if you should. I stared at that line for a long time, longer than I want to admit. Because buried beneath it was something I hadn't wanted to face. The only reason the truth stayed buried so long was because I was the type who could live with it. I could bottle it up, compress it, swallow it down like poison with a smile. And in doing that, maybe I did become the person they all assumed I was. My mother never spoke of it again, at least not out loud. She went back to humming in the kitchen and folding laundry like nothing had changed, though I noticed she started keeping the guest bedroom door shut at all times. She set 4 plates at the table even when it was just the 3 of us. She asked how Jamie was, but only once, and only in a voice so soft it barely counted as asking. Sophie, on the other hand, was not so gentle. She cornered me one night while we were brushing our teeth, her eyes narrowed in the mirror like she was looking through me instead of at me. I'm proud of you, she said, toothpaste still on her lips. But why the hell didn't you tell me sooner? I didn't have a clean answer. I told her the truth, or at least the part one could articulate, that I didn't know how to bring it up, that I thought it would ruin things, that I had convinced myself it was dead and buried. But more than that, I told her I didn't want her to look at me differently, and I think that hurt her more than anything else. I spent the next week trying to go back to normal. But normal, once shattered, doesn't reassemble. It just pretends. I worked, I cooked, I walked the dog, I mowed the lawn like the blades might slice through the weight in my chest. But the quiet didn't feel like peace. It felt like holding your breath for too long, waiting for the air to return. So I drove out to see Emily again. Not to apologize, though maybe I should have, but because I needed to see what it looked like when someone else survived the same wreckage. She agreed to meet, no hesitation in her voice this time. We sat at the same coffee shop, same seats, but the silence between us felt different now. Not heavy, just real. I heard she left town, she said, sipping her tea. Jamie. I think she did, I replied. No one knows where. And no one's really looking. She nodded, not smiling, not frowning, just accepting. That makes sense. I almost asked her if she was okay, but I didn't because that would have been selfish. What I did ask, after a long pause, was, does it help? Knowing it wasn't forgotten. She looked at me for a while before answering. Then she said something that stuck with me, maybe forever. I'm not sure it matters anymore. Closure is just a pretty word for trying to rewrite something ugly. I nodded, and we sat there a few minutes longer. Right before I left, as I stood up and reached for my coat, she asked the question I'd been dreading since the day I found her name. Why did it take you 20 years to speak up? I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, not a word, because there was no answer that didn't make me look like a coward or a liar or both. I just nodded again, the weight of the question wrapping around my chest like chains, and walked out into the cold. On the drive home, I thought about all the things we never say to each other, all the things we bury because we think silence is mercy or strength or wisdom. But maybe silence is just fear dressed up in good intentions. Maybe the real sin isn't what we do, but what we refuse to name. Sometimes silence is survival, but sometimes it's just cowardice in disguise. Christmas came around faster than I expected. The holidays have a way of sneaking up on you when you're avoiding them. Sophie suggested we skip the family gathering altogether, take a trip somewhere warm, pretend for a few days that we were normal people without ghosts trailing behind us. But I couldn't. There was something unfinished there, something that needed to be seen through. My parents' house looked the same from the outside, lights strung along the gutters, wreath on the door, that ceramic Santa my mom had been putting on the lawn since 1992. But inside, everything felt different, like someone had rearranged all the furniture just enough to make you trip. Dad greeted me with a stiff handshake instead of the usual bear hug. Mom embraced me longer than normal, as if trying to transfer some kind of silent apology through her arms. There was no sign of Jamie, though I hadn't expected there to be. Her absence hung in the air like smoke after a fire, invisible but unmistakable. Dinner was quiet, just the 4 of us, me, Sophie, and my parents, seated around a table that suddenly felt too big. My mom had made all my favorite dishes, a peace offering without words. My dad kept refilling his glass, eyes darting to Jamie's empty chair every few minutes like he expected her to materialize. When the doorbell rang halfway through dessert, I thought it was carolers or a neighbor dropping off cookies. I wasn't prepared for the sight of my sister standing there, thinner than I remembered, eyes hollow with dark circles beneath them. She wore a plain black coat, no designer labels in sight, hair pulled back without its usual perfect styling. Can I come in? She asked, voice small, uncertain, a tone I'd never heard from her before. My dad stood frozen in the doorway. Mom appeared behind him, gasping softly. I stayed at the table, Sophie's hand finding mine beneath it. Jamie stepped inside, removed her coat, revealing a simple sweater and jeans, nothing like her usual flashy attire. She sat down at the opposite end of the table, as far from me as possible, and for several minutes, no one spoke. I've been in therapy, she finally said, addressing no one in particular. 3 times a week. It's helping me understand some things. My father cleared his throat. Jamie, please, she interrupted. Let me say this. She looked up then, meeting my eyes for the first time. I've been lying for so long, I almost believed it myself. I convinced myself that what happened with Emily was just a misunderstanding, that I was protecting you, that I deserved your gratitude. But I know now that I was just protecting myself. I was scared, and selfish, and I let you carry my shame for 20 years. I sat very still, afraid that any movement might break whatever fragile thing was happening. I'm not asking for forgiveness, she continued. I don't deserve it. From you, or from Emily. But I wanted you to know that I've contacted her. I've told her everything. And I'm facing the consequences of what I did, finally. My mother's quiet sob broke the silence that followed. What does that mean, exactly? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. It means I've given a full statement to the University Ethics Board. It means I'm confessing to what I did, and to the cover-up. It means I'm trying to make amends, as much as that's possible after all this time. Sophie's grip on my hand tightened. My father sat down heavily, looking suddenly older than his years. Why now? I asked. After all this time, why come clean now? Jamie's eyes glistened. Because when you exposed me at Thanksgiving, I realized I'd spent my whole life running. And I'm tired. I'm so tired of being someone I hate. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to forgive her instantly, to cross the room and embrace my sister. Another part remained cautious, wary of another manipulation, another lie. I don't expect things to go back to normal between us, she said, as if reading my thoughts. I know that's not possible. But I couldn't let another year end with this between us. I couldn't keep living with it. We talked for hours that night, painful, honest words that should have been spoken decades ago. My parents shared their guilt, their complicity in the cover-up. Sophie listened, offering neither judgment nor absolution. And me? I listened too, trying to understand how one night could ripple outward, touching all of our lives in ways we never anticipated. I didn't forgive Jamie that night. Real forgiveness doesn't come in a single moment, wrapped in a bow like a Christmas gift. It comes in fragments, in small moments of understanding, in the slow, painful work of rebuilding trust. But as we sat there into the early hours of the morning, the air between us felt different, clearer somehow, as if the truth, once spoken, had opened a window in a room long sealed shut. When Jamie left, she hugged me briefly, awkwardly, like someone who had forgotten how. I'm sorry, she whispered. For everything. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. But it was something, a beginning, perhaps, of whatever came next. In January, Emily called me. She told me about Jamie's letter, about the university investigation, about her own process of healing. Your sister did a brave thing, she said, surprising me. It doesn't erase what happened, but it matters. When I hung up, I stood by the window for a long time, watching snow gather on the branches of the oak tree in our yard. Sophie came up behind me, wrapped her arms around my waist. What are you thinking? She asked. I'm thinking about that night, I said. And all the nights since. All the dinners, holidays, conversations where we pretended. All the years I spent believing I was someone I wasn't. She rested her chin on my shoulder. And who are you now? I considered the question, watching a cardinal land on a snow-covered branch, its red feathers bright against the white. I don't know yet, I answered honestly. But I'm ready to find out. Sometimes the things we bury come back to life in unexpected ways. Sometimes the secrets we keep end up keeping us, locked in patterns we can't escape. And sometimes, the truth, when it finally emerges, doesn't destroy us as we feared it would. It simply sets us free. The following spring brought an unexpected thaw, not just in the weather but in our family's frozen landscape. Jamie and I began meeting for coffee every other Sunday, awkward, stilted conversations at first, but gradually easing into something resembling actual dialogue. She'd found a job at a nonprofit, something with modest pay and meaningful work, a far cry from her previous life of chasing status and quick money. I still have nightmares, she admitted during one of our meetings, stirring her coffee without looking up. Not just about that night, but about all of it. About watching you carry something that was never yours to bear. I nodded, understanding more than I wanted to. The nightmares had visited me too, though less frequently now. It wasn't just you, I said. It was all of us. The things we don't say shape us as much as the things we do. My parents were trying too, in their own way. Dad had stopped drinking, joined a support group that met on Wednesday evenings. Mom had started therapy, finally confronting decades of looking the other way, of prioritizing peace over truth. They'd sold the house, downsized to a condo closer to town, as if physically removing themselves from the space where so many silences had lived. Emily and I still met occasionally. Our conversations had evolved from the raw, painful excavation of the past to something more forward-looking. She'd started a small advocacy group for survivors of sexual assault, was working on a book about recovery and resilience. You know what still gets me? She said during our last meeting, twisting a napkin between her fingers. The way one moment can split your life into before and after. Everything changes, but the world just keeps going like nothing happened. I understood that too well. How ordinary moments, a family dinner, a college party, a simple request for money, could become fault lines, dividing everything that came after. Sophie got pregnant that summer, news that filled me with both joy and terror. Late at night, I'd lie awake, one hand on her growing belly, wondering what kind of father I would be, what kind of legacy I'd pass on. You're not your father, Sophie reassured me, reading my thoughts with that uncanny perception she'd always had. And you're not defined by what happened to you, or what was done in your name. I wanted to believe her, needed to believe her. The past doesn't have to dictate the future, isn't that what all those self-help books claimed? But the past lives in us, shapes us in ways we don't always recognize. When our daughter was born in January, red-faced and screaming her way into the world, something shifted in me. Looking down at her, this perfect, innocent being who carried my blood but none of my burdens, I made a silent promise. No secrets. No shame. No sacrifices that weren't freely chosen. Jamie came to the hospital, bearing a small stuffed elephant and an uncertainty that made her seem younger somehow. She held the baby with trembling hands, tears streaming down her face. She's beautiful, she whispered. She looks like you. Let's hope she's smarter than both of us, I replied, and for the first time in forever, our laughter felt genuine, unburdened. My parents visited too, awkward and eager, their eyes full of a desperate hope I recognized all too well. The hope for redemption, for a clean slate, for the chance to do better this time. I couldn't promise them that, some stains don't wash out, but I could offer them this moment, this new life untouched by our mistakes. As spring turned to summer, then fall, then winter again, I watched my daughter grow, marveling at her curiosity, her joy, her absolute certainty that the world was made for her exploration. I envied that certainty, that innocence. Emily published her book. Jamie completed a year of sobriety. My parents celebrated their 40th anniversary with a small gathering where, for the first time in memory, no one pretended to be anyone other than who they were. And me? I learned to live with the contradictions, with the knowledge that healing isn't linear, that forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, that love and anger can coexist in the same heart. On my daughter's first birthday, as family gathered around to watch her smash cake with delighted abandon, I caught Jamie's eye across the room. There was a question there, an uncertainty still, after all this time. I nodded slightly, a gesture too small for anyone else to notice. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, that had come in pieces, gradually, over countless coffee meetings and difficult conversations. It was acknowledgement. Of where we'd been. Of how far we'd come. Of the truth that had nearly destroyed us but had ultimately set us free. Later, after everyone had gone and Sophie was putting the baby down, I stood on our back porch, watching stars appear in the winter sky. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. Thank you for today. For everything. I typed back, we're going to be okay. And for the first time in 20 years, I believed it might be true. The secret had lost its power. The silence had been broken. And in its place was something fragile but real, a family built not on perfect harmony or convenient lies, but on the messy, complicated truth of who we were and what we'd done. Sometimes silence is survival, but sometimes it's just cowardice in disguise. And sometimes, speaking the truth, however painful, is the only way to truly live. So here we are, still carrying the scars of that night, still learning to navigate its aftermath. But carrying it together now, in the light, where healing, real healing, has at least a chance to take root. When my daughter grows up, she'll learn about this chapter of our family history, not all at once, but gradually, in age-appropriate ways. She'll know that people make terrible mistakes, that families can break and mend, that truth matters more than comfort, that courage sometimes means facing the very thing you fear most. These are hard lessons, but necessary ones. Because the alternative, living in silence, drowning in secrets, paying the interest on a debt that compounds with every passing year, is no life at all. So we move forward, day by day, coffee by coffee, conversation by difficult conversation. Not perfect, not fixed, but honest. Finally, completely, honest. And in the end, maybe that's enough.